Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have an assortment of absolutely horrifying encounters. I also have a very interesting video clip that I'd like to share with you as well. Before we get into all of that, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below, merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, please click that bell icon. And finally, leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they definitely matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's upload, shall we? Today's first terrifying encounter. This happened back in 1979 when I was 15 years old. And it doesn't matter how long ago an incident like this occurs, because once it does, that trauma is burned into your brain. I was at Little Pipe Creek in the small town of Flora, Indiana, where I'd grown up. It was just a mile or so from where the creek empties into the Wabash River. My friends and I hung out there every day during the summer. It was late afternoon, and we had just arrived to our spot. As we approached the creek, I looked up at the tree about 100 feet away and saw a figure in it. It had long brownish hair and it was swinging from limb to limb, but it was straight up and down about 6 feet tall. I'm there with two of my other buddies. When I noticed the figure, I said, "What is that?" "It's not a monkey, but it's swinging like a monkey." It definitely was not a human either. Back then, we didn't know about Bigfoot or anything like that, and the sighting lasted a good 5 minutes. We're sitting there watching this thing. I had no fear in me at all. Then, all of a sudden, I just got the most fear I'd ever felt in my life. I looked at my friends and said, "We gotta go. We gotta get out of here right now." I think Bigfoot, or whatever this thing was, somehow put that sense of fear in me. The sensation was so sudden and strong. We take off up the nearby hill and head home. I'm going faster than my friends. I'm up in the weeds and I'm scared, and then my friend says, "Go, go, go. A man is chasing us. A man is chasing us." I thought he was joking. I looked around at his face, and I've never seen such a look of fear on his face before. We lived about a half a mile away, and when we got home, I went, "A guy was chasing us?" He goes, "Well, it looked like a man, but it was huge and hairy." We were scared to return back to our spot, but a few weeks later we gathered our courage and walked back to that creek. When we got there, it looked like a bomb had gone off. Several of the small and medium-sized trees were uprooted and tossed into the creek. But the first thing we noticed as we approached was this unmistakable odor of death and decay. We looked at the destruction as we stood there several yards away from the creek, and that's when we noticed the source of the stench. There were at least 3 deer carcasses and several small dead animals strewn throughout the site. We were getting ready to leave after only a few minutes. Then I started again to feel this strong, sudden urge to run from the area. That's when we heard this horrific growl coming from the surrounding woods. We instinctively ran home, and that was the last time that I ever went to that location. Several years later, after I had moved away, I ran into one of my friends who had experienced the incident with me. He stayed in Florida, got married, and built a home. He told me that the big hairy man had been seen reportedly along the Little Pipe Creek by other witnesses. Was this a Bigfoot? I honestly don't know. Tonight's second encounter. Hello everyone, I have an experience I'd like to share with you. I was 14 at the time. I lived in Youngstown, Ohio. I grew up on the north side of town in the city. If you look up pics of the old steel mills in town, you will get an understanding of what I am talking about. My buddy literally lived across from the steel mills at the time. We would regularly go down there and just to investigate this massive area, all but shut down and dilapidated. Well, we had certain old buildings that we frequented, and one we made into our home base. We spent several weeks making walls and strengthening spots so no one could get in, especially wild dogs that frequented the area. They were especially vicious. They seemed to travel in packs of 6 or more. The building we went to all the time had no stairs, so we had to jump up to get in. It made it safer for us. Now the building was right by an active railroad. The other working steel mills nearby used it to get their supplies in and out. Fast forward to summer, and we were there one night. We always had guns with us, as it was Youngstown, Ohio in the early 90s, Murder Town, USA at the time. Plenty of Bloods and Crips. We had chosen an old factory building that was huge, and we'd have massive fires right on the first floor. We erected walls out of these metal U-shaped things to give us privacy and safety, because if anyone saw us from the railroad, they would call the police and/or security, and we'd be in big trouble. Well, we're hanging out there, and we heard the pack of dogs coming, and we thought it sounded like they were chasing something. We went out to see, and they were near us over a huge mound of coke that steel mills use in the steel-making process. They ran over, and we heard a fight ensue. Vicious attacks going on, all dogs involved. After 6 or 7 seconds, we heard a louder dog above all the others, and the beginning screams of the wild dogs started. Then, to our shock at different times, wild dogs were literally being thrown over that mound in different directions. Finally, all the wild dogs ran away in the direction they had come, but as fast as they could possibly run, some limping, some with obvious injuries. We were shocked. Then one of my friends screams, "What is that? Look!" At that moment, I kid you not, a giant wolf-like animal, the size of which seemed quite honestly fake, crawls out on all fours to the top of the mound and is looking directly into the area where the wild dogs ran off. It lifts its leg and subsequently and substantially releases a urine flow that honestly seemed like it was released from a garden hose. That right there may sound amusing. It scared the hell out of us because it had the idea of just how large this thing was. One of my buddies stumbled backward into our makeshift wall, and then it turned its attention to us. I cannot relay to you the amount of fear we all had immediately. I feel it even now as I'm writing this out. The hairs on my arm are standing up and on my neck. It had these yellowish, amber-colored eyes that literally glowed like there had a power source behind them. Looking back on it, we agreed that it was from the light from the huge bonfire that we had made at our home base. The creature growled next, and it was so deep that we felt it. I said out loud that I just felt that in my chest. My 2 buddies said they were all good, and then all of a sudden they were lightheaded and got sick. I didn't feel that at that moment, but we were all horrified. It then did something so shocking, so alien to the status quo that we immediately felt in danger and ran inside the building and up 2 sets of broken, missing, and falling apart concrete stairs to the 3rd level. We were all very lucky that no one fell, or at least tripped, because there would have been some broken bones in that fall, maybe even worse. This creature stood on two legs, its back legs. They looked like a huge set of dog legs, but the large leg muscles were reminiscent of a bodybuilder, thicker. And just the look of its massive body was unbelievably impressive and intimidating. My one friend was crying, he was so terrified. When we got to the third floor, we had to smack and shake him to shut up, as well as covering his mouth until he almost passed out from lack of air. We hoped that this creature had left, and of course it didn't. After what seemed like an hour, but it was probably only 1 or 2 minutes, we hear it start to climb up the outside and start to enter the building. We first saw its shadow of this creature, which was 10 times as large as this beast. We all froze. No one dared make a sound. We should have dropped down out of sight, but we were so terrified, we just stood there staring. It came into the light, and we saw everything on this creature. It was, at the very least, the size of a grizzly bear. Again, the size was so large, it was hard to believe that we were not dreaming. That this was even real. It was, and it was happening 20 feet in front of us. This thing started growling, sniffing the air, and it just automatically looked straight up at us. It knew where we were. The whole time, its eyes glowing, the thing that stood out to us was it started to drool, but not a little. It was pouring out of its mouth. It was pouring from the idea that it was about to eat, to kill us. It could have been very easily for this creature. It looked away from us and saw the stairs. We froze again and got a newfound feeling of horror. It was heading to the stairs to come up to where we were. We started freaking out and looking around, and had only one escape, an outside fire case, going up to the roof. The part to go down had rusted and fell off however long ago. It hopped easily over the 3 missing steps and was instantly on the second floor. It was walking to the next set of stairs, and at that moment, we heard the most beautiful sound ever. A train coming right by the building, slowly too. They had to see the fire because when they passed the building, they let loose the treason horn. And this creature freaked out. It looked toward the opening of the building and in 2 seconds was out of the building and gone. We all started screaming for help, which no one heard, but also we just were screaming from stress and because we felt we were going to be maybe okay. When the train could no longer be heard, the fear set back in, and we thought every single sound was this thing coming back. It didn't, thank God. We then started to remember we had 3 pistols with us. We all took them out, took the safeties off, and started to make our way back down to the second floor. Waited 20 minutes, and then hit the first floor, and waited probably an hour before we ventured back outside, pointing the guns and flashlight in front of us the whole time. Remember, we didn't have LED lights back in the early 90s. These were those cheap plastic ones that only lit so much. But 4 of them helped light the way. We thought for sure every second we were making our way back to my friend's house that this thing was going to come after us. We heard the wild dogs from the distance and started running. We ran until we got to my buddy's house. Those of us who are still alive talk about that night every time we see or talk on the phone. We will remember that until the day we die. I'm still in awe that these things exist. Every time I see or hear an experience about somebody with 1 or more, I freeze. I am instantly brought back to that night, and I feel true fear again. Tonight's third experience is from a subscriber that many of you know from the comment section, Steel Redneck, or Jeff from Georgia. My Bigfoot encounter happened at the end of October, the beginning of November in 1993. The encounter occurred in Middle Georgia, off a boat landing, in Twiggs County, Georgia. The area already had lore about Bigfoot killing a camper at that boat launch. I'm not sure who came up with this idea that we had, however, somebody had. At least twice a month, in the cooler months, we'd bring our girlfriend and friends to scare the ever-living crap out of them. Then afterwards, have a couple of beers and chill for the rest of the night. We'd been doing this for 3 years up to this point, with me being the main person to scare everyone. Now, at this point in my life, I had heard of Bigfoot, but I didn't really believe in him. So, the night of the encounter, I was preparing, walking the path, raking sticks and leaves out of the way so no one could hear me move through the woods. All I wanted was people to barely catch my movements. I placed some glow sticks on the back of trees for markers and a weird glowing effect. Most of the time, I dressed in all black, but since it was close to Halloween, my friend convinced me to dress up in my dead soldier costume. So I walked the path 3 times to make sure everything was clear. It was. I got dressed in the costume and proceeded to walk the path backward like always. As I'm getting to the starting point, which is the last tree from where I start, I walk backwards. I have 28 steps from where I start. I have a cinder block as a marker, letting me know that I have about 10 feet left. 6 feet after my marker, I hit something, but I don't think anything of it. I veered off the trail and back into the tree. So I walk back to the last tree and start walking backwards again. I pass that marker and have 10 steps left. Boom! Ran into something again. This time I'm confused because the marker doesn't look like it had been moved. And then I hear this huff. My first thought was, great, I backed into a bear. I take a moment and I can barely feel breathing on the back of my neck. I look straight up, and what I was looking at was no bear. I panic at first, look back down and think to myself, this has got to be somebody in a suit. Somebody finally got one over on me. So I looked back up and quickly realized that this was no person in a suit. As I'm looking up, I pulled my mask off, and the expression on this thing's face was like, why are you pulling off your face? At this point, I looked back down and dropped the mask and gloves. I closed my eyes and started to slowly walk away. I got about 10 to 15 feet away, and I heard a twig or a branch snap and took off in a full sprint. I got back to my van and hauled it home. On the way home, I could smell this nasty stench all over me. I got home and walked in the front door, passing my dad. He looks up at me and said, you saw one of those things, didn't you? I tried to play it dumb, but he knew what happened. He proceeded to tell me to strip off everything and burn it right away. He said those things can track their own stench from at least 20 miles. I took a shower and he burned my clothes, including my shoes. He then removed the front seat of the van, cleared the entire thing, bought a new van seat later that next day. He explained that while in the military training in California, his unit encountered these things. One guy ended up lying down in a spot where they were lying. He never saw one, but he did hear and smell them. Some of his unit had seen them, but since one of his units had the smell on him, they tracked it all the way back to the barracks. I went back out to where I had my encounter with the Bigfoot. My mask and gloves were gone, and that nasty stench was still there. I have been out there a few more times, and I see it from a distance how I always smelled it first before seeing it. From that point, that Bigfoot never showed any aggression of any kind. However, that's not the thing. Can you imagine playing a prank on your friends? Something that you do all the time. You're out there having fun. And you back into a Bigfoot. That alone is enough to just terrify you. But then something else happens. As you take your Halloween mask off, you realize that this creature is like, what are you doing? How are you taking your face off? I've always I've known Jeff for a while on the channel, and he shared this with me before. Super nice guy, and he just recently typed it out for me to share with y'all, because it is just one of the craziest encounters. Like, you back into it, there it is, you take your mask off, and it's like, what are you doing? Oh my God. Like, he takes off running. I'm imagining the creature probably took off running too. Oh man, what an experience. Anyway, on to tonight's fourth and final encounter before we jump into some very, very interesting video and photo evidence. This next encounter is probably one of the top 20 maybe experiences I've ever shared or ever even heard. It was attached to a video that I had to take down for certain reasons, but just an amazing, horrifying experience. And I know that you guys will like this one. Hey everyone, my name is Amber and I live in Asheville, North Carolina with my dog Captain. Captain is the love of my life. He is an Alaskan cliché husky with mostly a black coat, but streaks of white fur around his legs and face, not to mention little rings of dark fur around his pale blue eyes that make him look like the Hamburglar. I rescued him from a shelter when he was just a puppy, right after my fiance moved out to Hong Kong for work. He helped me through the initial loneliness on nights when I just couldn't handle getting into an empty bed for the 50th time, and in years that followed when my fiancé decided to leave me and start a family with a Chinese woman he met at his job. Captain helped me through that heartbreak. Captain is a big guy, a subwoofer. While other dogs need walks, Captain needs hikes. Which is why every weekend for the past few years I would drive out to Nantahala National Forest, one of the few places he could really be a dog. Dogs aren't just meant to be cooped in the indoors. They need to run. They need to explore. They need a place like Nantahala. And coincidentally, so did I. I could really lose myself in a place and escape the pressures of a high-pressure, high-pay job. The woods were a place of sanctuary for me. That all changed one chilly October day when I came to realize that there is a good reason why human beings have walled themselves off in towns and cities, because wilderness, it seems, is not our friend. Captain was always his happiest in the woods. For such a majestic animal, he has an uncanny ability to act goofy, and the woods brought that out of him in spades. He would be so lost in the feeling of pure freedom, his blue eyes all wide, his tongue lolling to one side of his mouth, riding the waves of zoomies that inevitably had me laughing at how dorky he acted. So you can imagine how quickly I noticed a change in his behavior, how he went from such a loud and boisterous dog to a quivering, whiny wreck that barely ventured a few feet from me at any time. And all the time I've been taking Captain out, I've never seen him act in such a way. And when I laid my hand on his neck to give him a stroke, I discovered he was actually trembling in fear. My first thought was, maybe there's a mountain lion out here. But the previous encounter with what I had figured was a predator scent trail had caused Captain to bark incessantly, had become overly aggressive. Now, that was back in the fall of last year, and that previous summer that Nantahala had seen a sharp increase in black bear activity, with homeowners being encouraged to be much more careful surrounding their issues of food disposal. It was entirely possible that Captain had sniffed out a mama bear and cubs, and in which case he was right to be cautious, but he wasn't just cautious, he was outright terrified. What to make of such a situation, but one thing was clear: Captain wanted, and consequently so did I, There was one big problem with such a plan. We had already spent like 2 hours hiking into the woods. Getting out was not going to be quick or easy. With every step, the tension grew. Captain looking behind me with wild, terrified eyes, darting ahead before doubling back to whine at me. Each footstep seemed a little quicker. Then the last of my utter paranoia growing to a fevered pitch as I continued to look behind me and continually saw nothing, but something was behind us, and Captain knew it. And I could feel it at one point. He bounded back to my side and froze, staring off into the dense forest. As he sniffed the air before him, I thought the worst was over, but I was horribly, horribly wrong. With a yelp so loud it hurt my ears, he burst off through the trees, howling barks punctuating his canine gallop. That's when I heard it rustling in the trees behind me. And with a terror so rampant, I can still feel it to this day, I heard something behind me breathing. And it was huge. I just ran, following the sound of Captain's barks crashing through the dense trees as dry branches tore at my bare skin of my face. There was many times in my life where I'd be uncomfortable and anxious or scared. This experience dwarfed them all with no emotion. No emotion can compare to that of knowing you're being hunted by something you cannot reason or bargain with, something that will crush your bones into meal and not feel a frickin' thing. I ran harder and longer than I've ever have in my life, so intensely that when I finally had to stop and draw a breath, I found myself dry retching against a tree trunk out of exhaustion, out of fear, out of pure biological imperative, making me as light and mobile as possible. But there could be no respite. Captain's furious barks made that abundantly clear. We had to keep moving. It was that or be eaten alive. With tears in my eyes, I carried on running, hurtling through the forest and thickets so dense I was running half blind, which was made painfully obvious when I caught my foot on a fallen tree trunk and was sent flying into the air. Hitting the dirt, the impact knocked the wind out of me with an ugly grunt as I rolled onto my back, struggling for breath. I saw Captain appear at my side. He had been my hero so many times before and wasn't about to fail me now. His barks were wild, full of rage, his sharp teeth exposed as he poured raw force of his being into the woods behind us. It was terrifying, awe-inspiring to behold, and in that moment I thanked God that he was on my side, but not even Captain could maintain the display. For when the unseen thing hunting us seemed to roar back through the woods, Captain was silenced. He rushed over to me, taking the collar of my waterproof jacket between his teeth, trying to drag me along the forest floor. But I was renewed by terror, my biological imperative, by the raw need to survive. In an instant, I was back on my feet, running, panting, scrambling for life. I remember there being a moment when I was terrified that Captain may leave me, how the fear might prove too much for him to handle. There was so much of a force for him to escape into, but he never once failed to double back and find me. Even when he was out of sight, he made sure to continue barking ferociously, so I'd know exactly where to run. That was until I burst through a set of particularly thick brush to find Captain standing stationary at a river bank. It wasn't all that wide or all that deep, but it was enough of an obstacle to halt his progress. You see, Captain hates water. I don't know if it was something that happened to him as a pup before I adopted him from the shelter. Captain has always hated pools, rivers, lakes. You couldn't get him to go within 6 feet of them, which is why seeing that river in our way terrified me on a whole different level. Out of pure instinct, I just jumped across. Like I said, it wasn't particularly wide. But the exhaustion of running for so long meant that I only barely made the jump. I turned knowing that Captain wouldn't even attempt to jump without encouragement or direction. From my voice was trembling. I spoke, "Come on, boy. Jump to Mama, please. Jump. Jump to Mama." It was horrendous watching his eyes so full of confusion, saying without words, "Why are you making me do this?" I watched him pace up and down the bank as this thing hunting us was growing closer and closer. In the end, I was begging him, pleading with him, promising steak dinners for an entire year if he would only get himself across this river for a moment. He froze, sizing up that gap before sprinting off back into the trees. Again, that terrified feeling gripped me. He couldn't do it. He was so terrified of water that in that moment of pure panic, he fled in the direction of the thing chasing us. It felt like an eternity standing there on the riverbank, praying that he would reappear somehow, convincing himself that he did one glorious moment. Convincing himself that he wouldn't. Only he did. In one glorious moment, he burst through that foliage, hurtling towards the river's edge at breakneck speed. As he reached the bank, his legs unfurled like springs, sending him sailing through the air, high above that river. It was funny, the little details you remember from traumatic moments. And even one of those things that sticks with me was Captain's eyes as he jumped that river. They were these huge, massive, pale blue circles that seemed to shine out from the rings of black fur around them, almost like he couldn't quite believe what he was doing, and quite frankly, neither could I. I mean, it's when I say he was like an action hero in some hyperbolic 80 movie, the bravery he displayed is something I feel I can only aspire to. Even his landing was dramatic. He barely made it across and was scrambling up the dirt embankment when I leapt towards him, grabbing him by his collar and pulling him up onto solid ground. When we were up, he took off again, renewing his speed, seemingly more terrified of the water than what was stalking us. I had tears in my eyes before, but at that moment I broke down, completely calling after him with staggered breathing. "Good boy, Captain, good boy." I continued to run, feeling my thighs burn, my feet ache from what felt like miles upon miles. I was so short of breath, so exhausted, I thought I was going to pass out at any moment. When I say I could literally hear my own heart beating in my throat, I'm not exaggerating in the slightest. I am not an unfit person either. I dance a lot, I take a spin class, I have stamina. But running at almost constant sprint for a better part of an hour made it feel like my heart was about to explode in my chest. By the time I reached the peak of yet another gentle incline, my legs gave out from under me. I remember seeing silvery white patches appear in my vision, and no matter how hard I drew breath, I just couldn't seem to get any oxygen. When I saw something moving in front of me, something that definitely wasn't Captain, I thought that was it. I had passed out, and never to wake again, having been torn apart by whatever creature was chasing us. I woke up in the seat of a 4-seater pickup truck. As soon as I found the strength to sit up, I heard a voice outside the stationary vehicle to shout, "Hey, she's waking up." Suddenly the door opened and a person I had never seen before in my life offered me a bottle of water and asked if I was okay. I didn't speak. I just took the water and gulped like 3/4 of it down in one long sweet chug. But by the time I regained my senses, I was panicking. I couldn't see Captain anywhere. I looked at the stranger, dressed in his hunting gear, and tried to summon the strength to ask him where my dog was, although the words just wouldn't come out. The look on my face must have told him all he needed to know. When he told me Captain was fine, he was just inside the hunting lodge getting a bite to eat. I just cried with relief. I was so overjoyed. He was okay, but that's not what made me burst into tears. The hunter told me that for a while Captain wouldn't follow any of them out of the truck, no matter how much meat they offered to him. He just stayed by my side, yapping and whining, waiting for me to wake up. For a couple of hours, I joined the hunters in their lodge, eating hamburgers they offered me slowly while I regained my strength. I told them exactly what happened, how Captain freaked out after we stumbled across what I assumed was a black bear. But black bears are relatively small, certainly not as big as grizzlies, and certainly not as big as whatever was chasing us through the woods. I raised the issue with them and asked them what they thought it may be. I thought they might have an answer, being seasoned hunters, but they didn't. There was this awkward silence as they exchanged looks before one of them spoke up, saying they just didn't know. I asked if it was possibly a grizzly bear. Could it make it that far down from the Rockies? With one responding, it was possible. But that was an outright lie. These hunters quite possibly saved my life, and for that I will be eternally grateful. But I know they lied to me. Grizzlies don't make it anywhere near North Carolina at any time of the year. I've done my fair share of research into what was chasing us that day, and I've been unable to come up with anything conclusive. The only thing I know for sure is that those hunters were hiding something, and as long as they do, people will continue to go missing in that stretch of North Carolina woodland. Captain is lying next to my computer chair as I write this, ever faithful, ever watching me. In my darkest moments, I wonder, however, am I going to last without him? So, she pieced everything together at the end. I myself don't believe it was a Bigfoot chasing her. I believe that it was a Dogman, just because of the amount of experiences I have shared on this channel about Nantahala. It is a tract of woodland in North Carolina that is just full of dogmen. I don't know why. I don't know what makes it so special. But I believe 100% these hunters knew what was chasing that young woman. And God bless her and that dog. Man, that story is probably one, it gets me because the dog, but how she is able to put her puzzle pieces together. Like I always say, it's puzzle pieces, right? She's thinking huge animal, grizzly. Oh, grizzlies don't live around here. What the hell am I thinking? And then she remembers the roar and this and that. But if you think about it, she's saying what we're saying. As long as these hunters keep quiet and don't tell people what's out there, people will continue to go missing. And that's the problem with it. That's the problem with this. We tell, everyone that watches this show knows what's out there. But the people beyond this show, beyond other channels, beyond cryptid research, they don't know. They don't care. They think we're crazy. We know we're not crazy. Anyway, let's get into tonight's final part of the upload. This final part of the upload is very important, I think. With the introduction of AI and now computer-generated imaging and video, we are getting an absurd amount of fake video footage. I get at least 10 emails every couple of days about new videos. Check this out. What do you think? Check this out. What do you think? Now, the photo that you're looking at was actually a video that was huge, like a year and a half ago. The gentleman that you're looking at, his name is Rob Kabaski. He's a special effects artist out of Arizona. And he created this werewolf for a movie. Now, someone found his Instagram and posted the video that you're going to see very soon, and made a story behind it. Like, this was found in Mexico. It was shot by the Mexican government. It was hit by a tractor trailer. There was like 3 different stories behind it. And I'm sharing this with you because this is one of those videos that fooled people for so long. Right when it came out, I knew it was fake. I really did. I mean, if you've been with the channel, you'll know, because I said it. If you've ever seen one of these creatures, you will know the difference between a fake AI or CGI or SFX, because there's just a certain way they look, a certain way they move. And it's really, it's no one's, I can't. There's channels out there that try to pull the wool over people's eyes, But then there's channels like mine, like Dark Waters, who don't want to pull the wool. We want to give you the opportunity for you guys to look at it, you guys to decide how you feel about it, and so on and so forth. That's why in a video that James just recently put up, he put real or AI, you decide. That's why he puts it. That's why I put it. I'll put compelling. I'll never put real. It's just something that we have to be leery about. And here's something that I want to kind of point out. What if it's not these channels or a certain person creating these weird AI videos, but what if it's actually the government creating them to make us look crazier? It's very, to me, it's something that the government would do. Just really dirty, low down, underhanded maneuver to trick the American population, the world population, and have us look goofy. We're already looked at like we're goofballs anyway, because we believe in these things. Actually, we don't believe. We know these things exist. But then I believe that the government comes in and creates certain videos to just make it look like we're crazier. Anyway, check out the video clip. Here it goes.
Learn how to make something like this in Zambia.
Broken. That's what I thought. movie we're doing tonight.
We broke a picture of the building we had it light up.
That's already filled with film, man.
All cords. Like, it was a big, like a hall.
Yeah, but we didn't break it.
So we had lights.
It's okay. We could use this for
into the night. So
skid mark.
Right? How do you?
So this is
It's
my
broken.
werewolf
That's what I
for
thought.
the movie we're doing tonight.
We broke a picture of the building we had it light up.
That's already filled with film, man.
All cords.
All right, folks, I hope you all enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting this channel. The amount of growth we are getting in the last couple of days is absolutely mind-blowing, so thank you. With that, thank you for all your well wishes and prayers, support. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy. Keeping an eye on your pets, your children, your loved ones, your friends, your family, everything. Stay vigilant while in the woods. You know, these things are out there and they are deadly. They are not, Harry and the Henderson. Tom Mezek disappeared 40 minutes outside of my house up north. I've had 2 very strange experiences up there. You're going camping and hiking or whatever, and you take your eye off your kid for a split second. You might not see him again. I pray that it's not like that, but that's always a factor. Please stay safe, guys, and God bless you all.